All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Talk Back, and we're talking about legal stuff.
That's right.
We've already insulted each other around the room, so we got that out of our systems. I'm just kidding.
It's not going to stop.
John King over there, and of course our good friend Quentin Rhoades is joining us here in the studio several times on the show. You're a veteran now.
Yes, sir.
Got those headphones strapped on and ready to go.
And like any good veteran appearance on Talkback, this is when we get to throw something out of the dark where we totally did not expect or plan for it.
Exactly.
So, now, Quentin is not here to talk about the Mountain Water Trial at all. But of course, we're going to drag him into it real quick. He's here to talk about a very interesting case up in Helena that I think will resonate with people that experienced the Marcus Karma trial, through this radio station or through the local newspaper, because it's another home invasion shooting. It's going to invoke the talk about castle doctrine and stand your ground and these sorts of things. And I think there's some really interesting differences and similarities between these two cases. But before we get there, in the pregame, we were speaking with Quentin about
the pregame.
Yeah.
Wow, I like that.
Getting all warmed up, getting our juices flowing.
Gotcha.
During the pregame, we were speaking with Quentin about the cost of the Mountain Water Trial. Now, this is something Peter has had a notorious difficulty.
Let's put it this way. I have been asking around, okay? And local attorneys, for some reason, they don't want to comment on it. It's like, well, I don't know. Why don't you ask them?
Well,
here's my question. My question is, from the time the trial started until the time the trial ended, I just want a ballpark figure of how much money is being spent to adjudicate this case. I mean, just for general information, so people could know. Wow, that was pretty spendy. So if you came up with a formula that I thought was fairly reasonable.
Well, I don't think I'm letting anything out of the bag here to tell you the kind of the formula that we use when our clients estimate, well, how much is it going to cost to try the case? And, of course, you have pretrial proceedings, and that can vary widely depending on the circumstances. But a general rule of thumb for a trial is you take the number of days in trial, which, for example, in this case, I think is 10.
Right.
And you multiply that by 12 for generally the amount of hours that each lawyer will spend either preparing for or presenting.
Doing research. And that's
during the days of trial, exactly. And then you add into that as part of your fair estimate of what it's going to cost. You multiply it by 3 so that you can take into account the preparation time. The last 3 weeks, 30 days, 45 days before trial. You need to include that in your calculation. So the formula goes something like this. It's the number of days of trial that you estimate, or in this case 10, times 12 times 3, which is 360 hours per lawyer for the preparation and presentation of the trial.
This is where you want to hang on to your steering wheel. Go ahead.
Okay. So we have we calculated. We think there's 5 lawyers in the case. We've got Water Mountain Company has a lawyer. Carlisle has a lawyer. The water company employees have a lawyer, Mr. Zadek. The city has 2 lawyers at least. So I think we come to 5.
There's two from 2 firms, I believe.
Well, I don't.
Anyway,
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, but anyway, okay.
Okay. So let's just say 5.
Okay, 4 parties, 5 lawyers. Let's say there's 4 lead attorneys. In a case like this, they're going to be charging between $300 and $500 per hour. So you take 3, let's say $400 an hour.
Okay.
3 times 400 times 360. So there's $432,000 for the 3 lead attorneys. And then you add to that 3 more attorneys at, say, $200 an hour. And you're looking at another $216,000. So I would estimate to prepare and present this trial, not including this 2 weeks of briefing we have after the trial, in which case the parties are going to submit to the court these proposed findings and conclusions. You're looking at $750,000 to $1 million to present the trial.
Now, just your best estimate, do you think Joe Connor, the guy that's running for Carlisle or for Mountain Water Company, is that like a lower-end price lawyer? And the Carlisle's lawyer, do you think that's a lower-end price lawyer?
I can't imagine they're charging less than $500 an hour.
That's what I would guess, too. So we're thinking probably, the $500 to $800 range?
I think so.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate you sharing.
Of course,
that with
that's
us.
an estimate, and lawyers will do 2 things. They'll give discounts for volume, And like
really?
anybody else.
Seriously?
Well, I would not be surprised in this case that there's some kind of a write-off for that. On the other hand, they also will negotiate premiums for good results. So the winners here could get a little bump because they win. So I emphasize that those are just estimates, and there are a lot of things that can affect that. But if you're going into it in the front end and estimating for your client what it will cost, that's the sort of calculation that you'll be doing.
Okay. Well, that's good. Well, thank you for doing that, and I appreciate it. I realize that I don't mean to put you on the spot or put you out on a limb or anything, but that sounds reasonable to me. So.
I say that as I gently place you on the limb.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Anyway.
Before we run out of this first little
go.
bit,
All right.
The reason why we invited Mr. Rhoades on the show is, well, we've had him before. If you remember the sidewalk case about the city tearing up the sidewalk. This one's not as close to home, but I think it's close to home in the sense that it's an issue we all dealt with during the Marcus Karma issue. There's a trial going on in Helena, and the case involves a man by the name of James Stiffler. And I'm going to kind of turn it over to Quentin to tell his rendition of what happened, because I wasn't there, but you've looked at this a little bit more. What I understand is he comes home, finds someone in his house, there's a shooting, a home invasion involved shooting that occurs, and then 2 years later, charges are filed, and the guy is being pursued in a similar instance to Mr. Karma for perhaps murdering this other individual.
Allow me to ask this first, Quentin. Is this a criminal matter or is it a civil matter?
Yes, the charge here is deliberate homicide, so it's a criminal matter. Civil matter hasn't been filed. There's a 3-year statute of limitations, so there's still a year for someone to do that if they're inclined to do so. But this is a criminal matter, deliberate homicide, no statute of limitations involved with deliberate homicide. But the theory of the prosecution is that our client somehow knew that this burglar was in the house and decided to shoot him as sort of a revenge or maybe trying to arrest him. But the idea here by the prosecution is that our client did not fear for his own safety or the safety of someone else, and consequently he's not privileged to fire his handgun in that situation.
But now here, this is something very important to remember, and that is that this is an actual home invasion. This isn't a garage type deal. This is a man who is actually in your house, an actual burglar, or who knows what he was there for.
Well, actually, I think we do know now, right? So can you just basically tell us the story real quick?
Sure. It's undisputed that this decedent was burglarizing the home. He had pillowcases full of valuables that he had ransacked the house to find, and they were in his possession when our client arrived home. The difficulty our client had was that he could tell that there was an unfamiliar car there, and he knew that there was a problem. He saw through the window as he drove up that there was someone in the house that he didn't recognize. His problem was that he wasn't informed as to whether his wife was at home or not. And she parks in the garage when she is home. There's no way of telling from the outside whether she's present. And consequently, he felt compelled to investigate. And furthermore, having seen this heavyset gentleman in his house with no invitation that he knew of, he decided that the prudent thing to do would be to arm himself with a firearm that he carries in his pickup.
Okay, we're gonna hold off on that and come right back. I want to hear this whole story. I know you do too. 721-1290 is our number. Quentin Rhoades, attorney at law here from Missoula, explaining this case out of Helena. We'll be right back. It's the Thursday edition of Talkback. Absolutely gorgeous day here in western Montana. Of course, I'm Peter Christian. John King is over there. Go ahead, John.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, Quentin, and this might come up in case. So Mr. Stiffler comes home. He sees an individual in his house, and he decides to go in and engage because he fears his wife is at home. That's basically the scenario you're laying out.
That's right.
One of the things that came up in the Karma case was, why wasn't the police called? Was there any effort to contact authorities, that sort of thing? Did that happen in this case that we know of?
No, it did not.
Okay.
And he's been faulted for that. But, you can look back in hindsight. It's 2020. You think about, well, how much time did I have to dial 911? And, I can sit here and think about what best to do. In the meantime, I don't know what's going on inside the house.
Okay, may I insert? Okay, one of the favorite expressions that I heard from law enforcement on both sides, city and county, is that is that when help is needed immediately, police are minutes away. Okay, and if let's put it this way: if I drive up to my house and I see that there's somebody in my house, and I think my wife might be in there, I'm sorry, I'm not waiting. I'm going in to save her or do whatever. This is my house. I have a right to do that. So the whole idea of, well, I think I'll just sit and wait and hope nothing happens to the precious people I love inside before the police arrive. I just can't see myself doing that.
I don't think that any reasonable spouse would, man or woman. I spend a lot of time defending these reasonable use of force cases, and I've had at least 3 cases over the years where the husband is in some sort of a gunfight, and the wife is somewhere where she hears the gunfire, and invariably the women run toward the gunfire unarmed, and so consequently, you can see in a situation where you don't know what's going on and you fear for the worst, how you would not necessarily think, well, let's see, 911, I'm in the country, the sheriff will be here at least 20 minutes from now.
Yeah, when seconds count, the law enforcement's minutes away. That's
right.
So.
And I'm not even sure he considered that much. I mean, it was an exigent set of circumstances, and he was merely reacting, not thinking these things through.
And he's a man in his 60s.
Yes.
Right? He's an elderly man in his 60s, and he could see that the person in his house, rather large individual, younger individual.
He could tell that it was a large man, and after he entered the house and encountered this gentleman, he was much larger and very aggressive.
How large is the? I mean, he's 37, right? Somewhere in there.
He's 37, approaching 300 pounds. Large man.
Whew, 300 pounds.
And
that's bigger than me, and that doesn't happen very often.
Almost. The point is that he was very aggressive, and our client was very much afraid. And I don't think anybody disputes any of this. Now, there's the dispute comes in is when our client, when Mr. Stiffler encountered this gentleman, he was trapped in the house. He was trying to get out the back door, which was locked, and he turned aggressively toward Mr. Stiffler and screamed that I'm going to hurt you, a couple times, and threatened him with his fists, and Mr. Stiffler discharged his firearm to prevent that attack. And just as that happened, somehow the assailant got the impression that was about to happen and turned to run, and was struck in the back with a bullet. And so, that's the kind of the question mark that the law enforcement has is, how did this wound happen in the back? The wound is back from back to front, and then they found the bullet in a position that they thought was inconsistent with Mr. Stiffler's account. And so,
how many times did he shoot? Just the one time?
He shot twice. He shot the one time, and then the burglar fled through the window, got in his car to drive away, and crashed into some cinder blocks. And then Mr. Stiffler fired a second shot as a warning shot to tell the person to put his hands outside the window. So there were 2 shots fired, but only one in the encounter, and only one in the direction of the assailant.
Well, 2 last puzzle pieces to me that I want to get through before you go. First off, in the Karma incident, we had an issue, and it came up, and it keeps coming up because the trial, the defense keeps bringing this up. Their claim is that the media is telling a different story than the facts, basically, or the media is not covering all the bases, and that it's biasing the community, that sort of thing.
Or it's just a simple volume of pretrial publicity.
And my case, or my question for you is, are you seeing a slant in the media or disturbing trends in the media coverage of your case?
In our case, the media, I think, gave a fair account of what was in the affidavit of probable cause that went with the criminal complaint. And what I don't think is emphasized in any of those documents, and wasn't emphasized by the news media because I think it was being fair, was the fact that our client thought his wife could be in the house. The impression that's left is that our client came home, saw a strange car in the house, so he grabbed a gun and went in to shoot somebody. And that is an incriminating sort of circumstances if that's the story that the public becomes familiar with and convinced of. And in reading the commentary from the newspaper report, I think there were 115 comments, and it was clear that people on both sides, either supporting our client or otherwise, didn't have that extra fact that kind of, I think, turns the whole case.
Now, that's something that came out early on in the trial? I mean, when he was first being deposed after the incident? Or is that something that's more recent, the fact or the issue with him thinking his wife was in the house?
That's something that he thought from the very beginning. Now, how that came out with the investigation, the investigation started on May 22nd, 2013. And the initial determination by the law enforcement was this is a classic case of self-defense. And so consequently, they didn't have a problem with it. The problem came up in October of 2014. That's last fall. Last fall, on October 2nd and 3rd, 2014, the Lewis and Clark County hired an expert from Spokane, Washington, a private criminal crime lab over there, to come and look at the situation and reevaluate. And the question we have is, why wasn't this done initially? Initially, the conclusion was this was a justified use of force and that there's not a problem here. And for 2 years, nearly 2 years, at least a year and a half, that was the case until this hired expert came in.
So we're going to take a break and come back, and then we have a caller from Mike. A call from Mike will get you on. Now, Quentin can only be with us till 9 o'clock this morning, and that's all we could afford because of his billable hours. We're going to come right back. What's that?
We couldn't even.
I was going to give him a box of Cracker Jacks, but anyway, we'll be right back. We're back on Talkback. Let's get right back to the phones, and Mike has been waiting very patiently. Mike, go ahead. You're on with Quentin Rhoades.
Yeah, hang on just a minute. I got to change the phone here. This one's falling apart.
Well, we can't have that.
Hello.
Okay, go ahead, Mike. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what I want to ask is, gentlemen, is if you come into you drive up to your house, you see somebody's in there, and he's stealing you blind. You walk in there with a loaded gun. He's in your house, and you say, "Stop right there, or I'll shoot," and wait for the cops. He turns around and says, "Screw you! I'm going to walk out the door," and you shoot him in the back because he's walking out the door with all your valuables. Aren't you going to get tried under the current regulations we got nowadays? Because if you don't shoot him in the front, you are automatically guilty of killing somebody who initiated this problem to start with. The only reason that guy was dead is in a house he didn't belong to.
Okay, let's let him answer. I'll let him answer that. Go ahead.
You're not privileged to use deadly force unless you are threatened with force. Now, you've got something in Montana called stand your ground. Outside of your house, you get to stand your ground. In other words, if you're threatened with force, you don't have to retreat, but you have to be faced with deadly force in order to use deadly force. And if someone's running away, it's hard to argue that they were using force on you. Now, if you're inside your house, and this is what they call the castle doctrine, is when the rules are different inside an occupied structure, you don't have to fear for deadly force in order to use deadly force. You need only fear for force. So if someone threatens to hurt you inside your house, it doesn't matter what level of force they use, you can use deadly force. Now, outside your house, you've got to match force with force. And that's the key difference, and that's why we have something that they call the castle doctrine. Or, I prefer it as defense of an occupied structure because of the connotation there.
And that's one of the problems that the Karma folks had is that the judge instructed the jury on use of deadly force and defense of an occupied structure versus another kind of defense, and they wanted their affirmative defense was defense of an occupied structure. So,
well, and that defense works if you have a legitimate fear of force by the other person. And, I think that's where their defense kind of fell apart here. If the news media accounts were correct, I don't think that people really believed that Mr. Karma was in fear for his own safety or the safety of one of the people in his house.
Right. Anyway, go ahead.
Some Facebook comments.
About 30 seconds.
Okay, this will be a quick one. Mitchell says, a neighbor found a kid going through our cars. Missoula police said it was too icy to come and take care of the situation. I thought about that a lot during the Karma tragedy and trial. So, yep. back to that.
Well,
when seconds count, minutes away.
Right.
You can threaten deadly force to protect property, but you can't employ it. You cannot employ it to protect property. So, if you point your gun at someone and threaten to discharge it, if they don't stop, then you're okay. But if you discharge it, no.
We got to take a break. We'll come right back. Okay, we are back, and Quentin has graciously agreed to be with us for a few more minutes. Go ahead, John.
One of the things I definitely want to cover before we run out of time, and we do have a phone call from Dave that we want to get to, but before we get out of time, I wanted to ask you, Quentin, if you could go into some of the issues with the time delay. This is almost 2 years old, the hot instance that happened. So how is that affecting this case? This is very different from the Karma case, in which we had suspicions that there might be a murder trial within the week.
Yeah, well, minutes after it happened.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
So, if you could kind of elaborate on that.
Sure. One of the difficulties that we have in this case is that law enforcement did not treat it as a homicide at the outset. And so there was no crime scene investigation. There was, the scene was released on the day that it happened. The second day, they started to treat it more like a crime scene, but they still didn't secure the scene, and they didn't do a thorough job of their crime scene investigation. And worse for us is that we know that this poor job was done, and that things like blood splatter and gunpowder residue and that sort of thing was not carefully looked for on the scene. And so now we're there 2 years later trying to reconstruct it ourselves. And
so is there photo evidence? Is there video? Is there that sort of stuff?
Well, there's not the detailed kind of microscopic analysis that you would expect. There's photographs, and there's no video that we've seen yet. But the problem is that there's a dispute over where, for example, what room in the house and where in that room there was a discharge of the firearm. And there's a dispute over where the person was when the bullet struck him. And some of these details are very important when you're trying to determine whether this was justified. The prosecutor's story is that the burglar was running away, and our client shot him in the back to capture him. And that's just not our client's version of events. That's not his account, and I believe him. It's not his memory. And so, in order to test some of these theories, what you would do is look for this crime scene analysis that doesn't exist or doesn't exist in real time. And now we're kind of reconstructing it from, months and years later. Do
you mind just giving us a quick example? A lot of people will see this case, guy shot in the back, that's it. That tells me the story that I need to know. This guy was shot in the back. So how do you deal with that perception from your listeners, the jury?
It's very common for people in these sort of encounters to wind up shot in the back, because what a person will do is when they see someone pointing a firearm at them, they will very often try to dodge. They'll turn to run. Or, when they're convinced they're about to be shot, and a person, this has been studied for 40 years, because of officer-involved shootings where someone is shot in the back. And we're not talking about South Carolina here multiple times, just once through the back.
Big can of worms.
And a person can turn their back to someone in a quarter of a second. And so you have circumstances quite often where someone is confronted by someone with a knife or fists or maybe even a gun, and they produce their own weapon, and that person who's the aggressor decides to break off. Well, in the meantime, the victim has decided to discharge the firearm, and the bullet is headed downrange while the person's turning, and he gets hit in the back.
Sure. Let's get our caller on the line. Dave, first of all, thanks for holding. You're on. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jay, you answered most of my questions here. I was curious how close they were to each other. I mean, that would be important to me if I was a jury member. I mean, if they were 25 feet apart, it'd be an obvious that he wasn't being threatened, but since we don't know how close they were, it's I guess you have to go. Tie goes to the defendant. But the second shot bothers me a little bit in that it sounds like he did try afterwards to try to stop the person from leaving, and that would be a problem for me. But
now was that just like a warning shot, like fired over his head to say, "Look, I'm serious about this. You got to wait."
Well, he fired it into the ground, and
okay,
and it wasn't in directly at the person. It was within 180 degrees, no doubt about it. But it wasn't designed to hurt the gentleman, just to warn him that he was being demanded to stop. Now, the second question is how close they were. This has also been studied a lot, and a person can cover 20 feet in about a second and a half. An assailant can, and this has been tested and tested. People who don't seem to be highly ambulatory can cover that distance in under 2 seconds. And so if someone is telling you that he's going to hurt you, his fists are doubled up, he's leaning forward, and he has gloves on, about to execute on that threat, you have to make a decision in a second as to whether you're going to test the theory that maybe he won't hurt you, or if you're going to protect yourself. So it's a very difficult decision to make.
Tell you what, Dave, I want to get at least one more call in before we have to let Tyler go. Okay, thanks for your call. Quentin, go. Tyler, you're on Talkback. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. The problem with the distance thing is not a problem in my mind, and a lot of people that I know. The facts of the case are the man was shot inside the guy's house, period. Whether it was shot in the back, the face, the head, the leg, it doesn't matter. He was shot in the house because he was not supposed to be in the house, period. It doesn't matter where he was shot. Now, when he left the building, the guy should have called 911. And they got in his car and followed the guy and just talked the cops in from there. The second shot, then it's been unnecessary, but he was trying to prevent the man from leaving because he could have been held liable if the guy got in a car and left, crashed a car, killed some grandma walking down the street in the middle of the night. The guy was wounded, right? Yeah. So he has to take care of the situation. And in the moment, I think that the guy said in his head, there's no way this guy's leaving this property because of liability.
Hang on, Tyler. I'm going to let Quentin answer that, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure how far ahead he was thinking. The problem is that you've got this person in your house who's threatened you, and you're supposed to make carefully calculated decisions that are perfectly wise and just. And the difficulty is that our client did not start the situation, and he was compelled to investigate when he didn't really want to because he didn't know what the facts were, and then he's confronted with this situation. So now we have days and weeks and months and years to sit back and second-guess his decision-making, and I suppose we can do that. But it seems a little bit unfair for him to be forced into this situation by an aggressive burglar and then him to suffer the consequences of what some people think was a bad decision.
Now, Dave earlier had mentioned something that sounds like something from a sports theory about tie goes to the defender. Is that the case in actual criminal law? In an instance like this, when you don't know what happened because of mistakes that were made in the past?
Well, that's the protection of the criminal idea that it's got to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that our client meant to kill this person and had no justification. So there's a lot of protection in that. The difficulty is the ordeal of a trial, let alone the expense. The hardest thing about my job is watching what happens to my clients as they go through this experience, and the weight that they lose and the relationships that are damaged or lost and everything else that goes with it. It's a miserable, horrible experience. And, our client and anybody who gets in a situation where they have to discharge their firearm ultimately decides, gosh, I wish there's some way I could have avoided this, not only for the sake of the person who was injured, but also for the sake of the person who was forced to make that choice.
Now, Quentin, I know you have to go. You spent more time than you originally planned. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, as always. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Quentin Rhoades, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, folks want to get in touch with you for one reason or another. Do you mind giving a phone number?
Sure, you bet. 721-9700. It's QMR@montanalawyer.com.
Great. Thanks a lot. Okay, Quentin Rhoades, we're going to take a little break, come right back, and Craig will get your call on. We're going to do some open phones when we come back, and Talkback continues in a moment. And we're back to Newstalk. Welcome back to Talkback. I keep forgetting to put the music in, so I feel like da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay. But let's get Craig on the line, who's been waiting very patiently. I'm sorry we had to let our attorney go. We ran out of hours. So, Craig, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, gentlemen. I've never been patient.
Okay.
So, nonetheless, I was calling because I just wanted to object to these people being referred to as gentlemen. You know, for instance, if somebody's mugging your grandmother and then they go to court, they always refer to him as this gentleman.
I prefer the word individual.
Yeah, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to remind you of something you said, Peter.
All right.
Now, this guy that shot that fella in the back here most recently, had he been put on a bulletproof vest daily, he's one of those individuals that you refer to as a hero. You know, we had this conversation before. You said to me, well, wouldn't you consider somebody that puts on a bulletproof vest every day a hero? You know, and that was when I called and said that we've just bastardized the word hero. We've used it so liberally anymore. We've screwed up the meaning of it.
Well, I don't think Peter was narrowing it down to just anyone that wears personal defense. I think he was speaking specifically about law enforcement or military professionals.
Well, some military men don't get to put on a vest every day. They go out there without one.
That's true.
This is very true. Yes.
Even that, you know, heroes are Medal of Honor winners, Silver Star, Bronze Stars, and the likes, you know, or somebody that saves your drowning child.
Sure.
Well, you know what? A lot of people are, I think, heroic just by simply showing up every day for a work that could kill them, for a job that might end their life. I mean, just because you don't have the opportunity to show that heroism doesn't mean that you're not a hero.
Well, I never want to get that opportunity either.
All right, so I won't call you a hero then. Does that help?
Yeah, call me an idiot.
All right. Thanks, Craig. Thanks for the call. All right. So that was easy. 721-1290, 1-800-NO. We love Craig. And sometimes we agree to disagree on things, terms and semantics and that sort of thing. But
no heroes here.
Yeah,
all right.
Anyway. All right. So what do you got for us, Uncle John?
I got a lot, but it looks like I got a phone call.
Okay, you go grab the phone. All right. 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309 is our number. We're going to be doing some open phones for the next 43 minutes or so.
It's like you got a clock in front of you or something.
I certainly do. Let's get Nick on the line. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
What's up?
Yeah, I'm just calling because I listen to the radio here, and I'm kind of I don't understand what's the point of having a gun anymore if you can't defend your property too.
Yeah, that's true.
You could threaten to have to use force, but you can't actually use force.
Well, see, here's the deal, and we've had Gary Marbut on our program several times, and I consider Gary to be, if you will, the quintessential expert in firearms safety and firearms training. Okay, the guy knows his stuff, and he says when people go through his firearms training, they learn that when they take that firearm in their hands, that they themselves become a deadly weapon, and they have to be able to know the circumstances and the probabilities of what could happen if they discharge that firearm, and they have to be aware of the possible penalties that could be involved. You know, so I think when you go out and purchase a handgun or a rifle or a shotgun or whatever, you need to have the training to know that you take on another world of responsibility when you do that.
Well, and it also, I mean, we think just morally, right? There's life and there's liberty and there's property. I mean, there's hierarchy, right, that most of us abide by and respect. And to sacrifice someone's life for property is disgusting for most people. And you could think of 100 instances, but I mean, I think of as a kid, when I was a kid, I remember I was playing around and exploring in an area where I probably shouldn't have been, and I crossed into some farmer's property, and he fired his gun off in the air. Now, we thought he was firing at us. But if someone actually had killed a kid for getting on their property, trespassing, I mean, that would be a horror story for almost not only the parents, but almost everybody in the public. No one wants to see that. And that's the kind of thing that you could have if you start treating life and property on the same plane.
Right, but the thing that we potentially can have now is a burglar is going to come in your house, take your TV, and you're going to threaten him with a gun. He's going to, just go, okay, have a great day, and just walk out with your television. You have no recourse. So it's just open season for Everton, Missoula to get burglarized by your neighbor. It's, up and coming new occupation.
Well, that's an interesting take.
It's something that's been brought up before. I mean, Trapper Mike brought that same point up. What are you going to do? Follow him out the house with a gun?
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the point of a gun is to have that recourse.
Right.
And of course, you don't want to shoot, but I mean, if they're stealing your stuff, I mean, I guess really the the right thing to do is just buy a taser and that's good. But you could tase them, you could pepper spray them, and if the cops still think the road's too icy, what's the recourse as an individual who just got burglarized the week before?
I hear you. Hey, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Thanks for expressing that. And we have Eric and Tyler both waiting. We're up against a break. I'll bet this may take us right to the top of the hour.
I think all the prep that I did this morning was waste.
Well, we'll see. But that's okay. Open phones is open phones. So we're going to come right back with more in a moment. Now we're getting back to normal. All right, 721-1290 is our number. That's John King. I'm Peter Christian. All three lines are full, just as I kind of figured they would be. But we have some Facebook comments.
Facebook can't technically get full, but it's very full.
Gotcha.
Okay, Matt says, so someone is in your house when you arrive home. What are you supposed to do? Sit around and wait, and then when he comes out, retreat again? Let him have everything that you own? Maybe you should just escort him to the gate and hold it open for him. He's burglarizing your home. He's trespassing. And obviously, this is all caps, and I'm trying to give the enthusiasm, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it for the whole sentence here.
Right.
Has no concerns as to whether you are home or going to arrive anytime soon, thereby displaying a gross lack of concern for your well-being.
I understand. And that's all true in theory. All right? That's all very true. But what has happened time and time again in a court of law with attorneys and lawyers and judges and juries and all that is, the rules are very specific as to when you're allowed to use deadly force.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're not allowed to use deadly force in defense of just property. You're just not allowed to do that.
Well, and so it's also, it occurs when
it doesn't sound just, but that's, anyway.
When there's a threat, right? That's the big difference in trigger. Well, just imagine if you're in a situation like Mr. Karma was before he ended up killing Diren Dede. There was the instant with the man came to do the lawn and he didn't know about it, right? Yeah. What a silly thing to kill over, right? But that almost happened.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to the phones. And Eric, thank you for holding. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. The problem I see is the underpinnings in gun control and all of this. If you watch the news, they talk about gun crimes and illegal guns. If there weren't an attack on guns, I wouldn't have such a problem with the laws. But what they do is they make gun crimes more egregious than, like, let's say you picked up a 2x4 and beat the guy with a 2x4. They always amplify the fact that he did it with a gun. And that's the attack on our rights. And another problem that I see with at the local, state, and national level is that offenses and crimes are the state makes itself the victim rather than the real victim, and so they tack a fine to you, and you end up paying the state instead of the real victim in all this. And that doesn't just go towards shooting somebody in your house. That goes to things like traffic tickets, stuff like that.
All right.
There's no real victim. It's the state that's made itself the victim.
Gotcha.
Hey, thanks for your time.
We got to run.
Can I make one more comment?
Very quickly.
Go ahead.
Making every public servant a hero is state worship.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Tyler, you're on Talkback. Go ahead.
Thanks for letting me back on. Open phones, I'd like to change the subject real quick.
Sure, no problem.
Hopefully you guys have this in your show prep. The NORAD Command Center is being moved back into the Cheyenne Mountains.
I heard about that, yeah, because it's EMP proof.
Well, here's the thing, right? For how long, how many years? I think it's been 5 or 6 years where people have been trying to push bills through Congress to harden the grid. And the federal government has put their fingers in their ears and said, no, it doesn't, EMP doesn't work. There's no way it's provable. When the government moves its facilities back into a facility they vacated in 2006 because of the threat of EMP, we might want to pay attention.
Yeah. And it's especially kind of disturbing, all the electrical grid issues that happened in Washington, D.C. over the past couple days, right? And everybody's thinking, was this planned? I know they're all saying it's an accident, but those particular facilities getting hit does look kind of planned, doesn't it?
Tyler, we got to run. Thanks for the call, man. Appreciate it. Catherine, you're on Talkback. Hi.
Hi. There was just something that I wanted to point out when you were talking about the relationship between the police and you brought up the minutes or the seconds versus minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Quote, 1981, Warren versus District of Columbia ruled that legally police are not obligated to respond to a crime in progress, and that was adjudicated by a Supreme Court decision. The duty to the public at large is what's going on. It's not a duty absent a special relationship between a police and an individual. There is no duty for the police to respond to any sort of crime.
So, forgive me, but why do we have police? They
are to investigate.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Right. And I'm not trying to make light here. I'm just saying, most of the police that I know, if there's a crime in progress, the sirens are going and off they go.
Right. Sure. I know. I'm just saying that was the decision in 1981 at the Supreme Court level, that there is no duty to respond.
Right. Now I can understand that if there is a situation where a law enforcement officer could, know that he's putting himself in an opportunity where he might be killed, or I can understand that, but I don't know. But maybe that's all part of the job, and I have lots of friends of mine who are in law enforcement. I should ask him about that.
Well, yeah, it's kind of an interesting little. So that there's, I would think that it has more applicability with regard to lawsuits against the police. If they do not show up in any particular hurry to a crime scene. But
gotcha.
Anyway, well, okay.
Thanks, Catherine.
Sure.
Appreciate the call. And Dave and Craig, we're going to have you guys on here in just a minute. We're up against another commercial break. 721-1290. We have one line open, and it won't be open for long. I can pretty much guarantee it. We'll be right back with more Talkback in a moment. Okay, thanks for joining us on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. Now, you have the decision right there, right?
Well, I have parts of it.
Okay.
So the decision kind of led to what we call public duty doctrine.
Okay.
So I'm going to read, this is from U.S. Legal, their definition of public duty doctrine. And it has to do with whether or not you can sue a police force if they fail to act.
Okay.
In the case that Catherine was mentioning, a hot instance where the police didn't show up. Okay, public duty doctrine is a principle of personal injury law that government owes duties to the public at large rather than individuals. In general, this doctrine provides that a government entity can be held liable only when the duty breached was owed to the injured person as an individual and was not merely the breach of an obligation owed to the public at large. So what they're talking about, their duty to an individual, John's casual understanding of this is that, like, for example, the police are patrolling your house particularly, or are enlisted to protect you perhaps from the mob, or you know what I mean, that you have a guard unit on you,
okay,
or something
right.
like that. Okay. Right. Governmental duty to protect its citizens is a general duty to the public as a whole. When there is only a general duty to protect the public, there is no duty to care for an individual citizen, which may result in liability. In short, a duty to all is a duty to no one. However, this doctrine is not followed in many U.S. states. For example, Florida Supreme Court explicitly holds that the public duty doctrine has no continuing vitality under Florida law. In the context of public duty doctrine, to establish a special relationship, the plaintiff must show one. Oh, here we go, the special relationship. Some form of privity or direct contact between the government agency and the plaintiff that sets the plaintiff apart from the general public. Number two, the agency gave the plaintiff specific assurances that resulted in the agency undertaking a duty. And three, the plaintiff justifiably relied upon those assurances. So
okay. So what that tells me is if the officer does not have a legal obligation to rush in, okay, to take care of whatever situation it might be, then when he or she does choose to do that and put himself at risk or herself at risk, when legally, according to that doctrine, they don't absolutely by law have to, that makes them, to me, even more heroic when they don't have to do it. So anyway,
and I
should
point out that decision was controversial even at the Supreme Court. It was a 4-3 split.
Right. Okay.
And just knowing that different states have different takes on this, I'm sure this is something that will be with us for a while.
Oh, yeah. Dave, thanks for holding. You're on Talkback. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. First of all, I've got two questions. Who called the cops in this situation in Helena?
In Helena? I don't know.
Well, I think that, I honestly don't know. He might have done it after they were in the car. Couldn't tell you.
He might have done it after the situation was over and everything was resolved. Then he called the cops and said, I just had a situation in my house. I don't know.
Okay. Second question. Why no coroner's jury inquest?
Well, because it wasn't treated as a crime. It was just considered, I mean, they ruled it as a justifiable.
All right, why not now? Huh?
Because they're charging him with murder.
Deliberate homicide, and I don't know.
Well, why didn't they do it before they charged him?
Well, it's not
a coroner's jury. Or is it because he is not connected?
Connected meaning what?
Well,
he doesn't have influence.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't have somebody on the inside helping him out.
Whatever.
Okay. Well, it's good questions.
All right.
Appreciate the call. I don't know the answers to them, so that's all I can plead is ignorance, and I do that a lot. So, Craig, good morning. You're on Talkback. Hi.
Yeah, once again. Say, speaking of this power outage in Washington, so I've never understood that if it's such a national security issue, having them, terrorists mess with our power grid, then how come we don't just go back to mechanical means of supplying that power grid? I just think that it's not such a threat. It's a threat that's easily resolved.
When you say going back to mechanical means, what do you refer to?
Well, the way we handled it for 50 years before we had the computers and stuff.
Well, I think that
it's my understanding that all they have to do is get into your computer,
I don't think EMP simply refers to computers, Craig. I think it belongs to almost anything that's electrical, and that could include your car engine, your car battery, basically anything that runs off electricity. Which
No, sir, I'm speaking about our power grid.
Okay.
I've heard so many times that it's of a national security issue because they can make us have blackouts, and in big cities things just fall apart then. But if it's such a national security issue, I just don't understand why you can't just take it off of the computer and then have it the ability to operate it mechanically.
Well, because
like we did so many years prior.
If I'm not mistaken, an EMP would damage more than just the operations. It would damage the transmissions as well.
Right. But how would they go about shutting down our power grid in a big city? I think they get into I'm computer illiterate, as you can understand that now. But they just get into the computer that operates the power grid for whatever area, and they shut it down and they create a blackout.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Hey, listen, we're up against a break. I appreciate your call.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Craig. Good to talk with you again. Marilyn and Paul, and we have a line open, 721-1290. I'm sure there are people far more well-versed in EMPs than John or I. We're just kind of going, huh?
Trust me. Yes, there are. I guarantee it.
Huh? We're coming right back. All right, it's Thursday, and it's absolutely beautiful outside, and they say we're supposed to have snow or rain or something today, but I don't care. I'm just going to enjoy the sunshine. So go ahead, John. We have a Facebook comment.
Yeah, I asked our listeners this morning to kind of go over the two cases, the James Stiffler case that we had Quentin on to discuss, and the Marcus Karma trial, which we all kind of know of from listening
ad nauseum. Yeah,
the news and talkback over the past year.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, Jeff says that the two cases have very little in common. Marcus Karma set a trap and told people ahead of time that he was going to kill someone. That would be premeditation. Stiffler defended himself and his property. Mitchell says, in both cases, the deceased was somewhere doing things that they should not have done. I am real careful about venting these days, though, in case it might end up in court and be used against me in a court of law. All right.
Good point.
Let's go to calls.
All right, let's do that. So Marilyn is up next. Marilyn, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Good morning. Early on in the show, you said a couple things about life and property and protection and stuff, and it made me think of the bill that's at the Senate Judiciary Committee right now. It was heard yesterday morning, a constitutional amendment to declare the unborn baby a person.
The personhood amendment, yes.
Yes, and so
which is presented every session and is defeated almost every session.
Well, so that doesn't mean that.
No. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's what happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm making it known so that people who want to call can call, and we can give a message to the whole committee. And I want to bring up a prophecy from a right to life leader. Well, not a right to life leader, because they don't, in my opinion, do very much to abolish abortion. But anyways. A rescue leader back in 1987 gave the prophecy. He said, and maybe I shouldn't use the word prophecy because people don't even like
prediction. How about a prediction?
Anyways, a prediction, whatever. He said, back then, if we don't start standing up for the first right, which is life, we will see all of our other rights being eroded over time. And look what's happened. Because God is serious about life. He created it. The baby's made in His image. We're not supposed to go out and just kill it for little or no reason. And so I'm encouraging anybody that's interested in this bill and interested in our posterity, which is also in the Constitution, the future of our country, judgment on this nation. Hey, the Civil War, everybody claims that was done over slavery, all that blood that was shed then. Well, there's been a lot of shed blood. These babies being murdered, and we're going to get it on this soil again if we don't hurry up and turn this thing around.
Thanks, Marilyn. Thanks for your call. Appreciate that. Go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to say, Marilyn makes I think a pretty good point. When you think about the hierarchy or the Lockean hierarchy, what I'm talking about here is, you've all heard the phrase, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that Thomas Jefferson is famous for using. Well, he basically cribbed that from John Locke, a philosopher, which you could think for most of your Constitution, actually. He wrote in the two treatises on government, basically the rubric that would become our U.S. Constitution. Anyway, John Locke formulated life, liberty, and property. And they're in that order for a reason, because if someone takes your property, you're still alive and you're still free to move, right? But if someone takes your liberty, you can't hold property. You don't have any liberty, right? And if someone takes
but you still have your life.
And you still have your life. But if someone takes your life, you don't have those other rights.
Right.
And this is, I think, a very important thing for people that are pro-choice to understand. We, as a liberty-minded guy, I'm very much for liberty. But when liberty takes predominance over life, that's a scary circumstance for me. And that's the issue that I find myself in when I'm considering the life in the womb. You can't value a person's choice over another person's life. Otherwise, you have a collapse of the hierarchy, and that's very dangerous for society.
That's good, Paul. That's very well said. Paul, you're on Talkback. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I have two comments. What we don't think about if there's an EMP is it shuts down everything.
Right.
It shuts down your refrigerator, or shuts down the hospital, shuts down the police, it shuts down everybody. So,
and really only if you have a manual gas-powered generator will you have electricity, right?
Yeah, that or solar power. My second comment is on what you were talking about earlier, and I think what it comes down to is we have lost somehow in our society a respect for other people's property, and a respect for the police. I mean, Peter, you and I probably were taught when we were kids, if a policeman stops you, you're going to run from him. That's the last thing. You respect authority, you respect his authority. And I realize there's bad authority out there as well as good authority, but you just don't run from it. And, as far as protecting your home, I have a little sign on my front door that says, this door is locked for your safety, because, good people don't break into houses. Criminals break into houses.
Right.
So, I just figure that if they're coming into my house with a locked door, they're coming in to do me harm. So that's why I believe in the castle doctrine. But I think it really gets down to that we just have as a society, lost respect for any type of authority. I think the government has done that. When a police officer stops you, I think there's a lack of respect in how you respond to the police officer and everything else. So I didn't do that. You're willing to lie to the police officer. My son was a police officer here in Missoula for a while, so I know all of what goes on within the police department too. And I'm not saying that every policeman is an angel. And that guy yesterday didn't need to shoot the guy in the back. That's for dang sure. But I really think that if the victim hadn't been running and had just shown some respect for the police, we just don't have the respect for authority anymore that we used to have.
And we may never have again.
That's very true.
The way that things are fomenting right now in some of our especially the South and in the East, it's really spooky. It's scary.
I hear this stuff from people from time to time. We don't have the respect that we had in the past, but maybe I'm watching the wrong video from the 70s and 80s, but that things looked like they were a lot worse off in the 70s, in my opinion, just from what I've been able to see. Well, I wasn't alive.
If you look in the 60s.
60s as well.
I was going to say, John is a youngster. You have to go back to the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you say the back, you're talking about the way, way back.
Right. Okay. Okay. Tell you what, I'll hold him down and you slap him. How's that sound?
I was going to say, I'm coming over there in a few minutes.
Don't hit me with your cane, Peter.
I understand the 50s and 60s.
I hear you. Hey, we got to run. Thanks for the call.
Thanks.
721-1290 is our number. 1-800-568-5309. If my mom and dad, well, never mind. I'll just be, somebody will make fun of me for bringing up some old stuff. So anyway, we'll be right back with more of Talk Back in a moment. And we're back on Talkback, 721-1290, 1-800-568-5309. Okay, John King's over there. I'm Peter Christian. All the wonderful preparation work you did, John, I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, by the way, I came in really, I could have come in at 5 this morning because I dropped my wife off and said goodbye to all my peace and harmony when I come home.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there for like an hour before work, just listening to audio, getting it all cut for everybody. And of course, we're not going to use a second.
But, I just want you to know I appreciate it. So let's get John on the line. John, you're on with John and Peter. Hi.
Hey, who was killed?
I'm sorry?
Who was murdered?
You mean the burglar over in Helena?
Yeah.
Are you talking about what happened in South Carolina with the police officer?
In Montana.
Okay, yeah, this was James Stiffler was the homeowner. He came home to find a burglar in his house. He thought his wife was inside, so he went inside, and he's a very small man. The intruder was a very large man. He had his weapon, and just as from what I understand, as he was about to, he said, "I'm going to shoot." The guy turned his back, and he was struck in the back and killed.
And of course, a lot of this is going to be contested. We don't know.
Right.
The name of the murderer, though, hold on, or the deceased.
I think the last name was Johnson, but I could be wrong.
I'll look it up for you during. Well, did you have something relevant to talk about with that? Did you want to bring something else up?
I didn't get what happened. I heard someone talk about some murder and then contesting the Castle Doctrine. But I think that it's fair that, someone enters your home without, legal premises and shoot the hell out of them, give them a chance to escape and then shoot them, if they don't, leave.
It's Henry Thomas Johnson III is the name of the
Henry Johnson,
the deceased.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for your call.
Thank you, John. Appreciate the call. And Katie, good morning. Thanks for calling, Katie. What's up?
Well, I guess I have a parallax view of things today.
Go ahead.
The officer.
What a wonderful word that is, by the way, parallax. Oh, go ahead.
Let's supposing that officer had a call, and it was from Bank International, that there was a robbery in process, and he arrived, and he saw this man with a great big bag of looks like bank money, running as fast as he could, and he shot him. Now I wonder what the media would have done with that. Would it have had a different twist to it? What if they'd have seen him carrying out a bag of money from a bank?
I don't know.
I wonder too. I got another question.
I will hold on. I will say that the circumstances here are very different because the situation in South Carolina is this African American man was pulled over for having a broken tail light, and it escalated from I don't know exactly what happened, but it ended up being him being shot in the back 5 times while he was running away.
Have you watched the video?
I have.
Yeah.
No,
so
I'm not speaking of that one. I'm speaking of the officer that did that shot the man in the back.
There was not an officer. It was a homeowner that shot. You mean here in
No,
Helena?
you're talking about a different one. I'm talking about the previous case of the officer that shot a man in the back, and I'm just changing the complexion of it a little bit. What if it had been a call from the bank, and the person was running away? I also have a question about Aditi and his family that are suing for damages, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
I wonder if their son's action would have been done in Germany, how the German court would have handled it, or if it had been done in their homeland in Turkey, and the boy was looting somebody's garage.
You know, it's interesting you to bring that up because there are so many different factors that really didn't enter into the trial portion at all. First of all, we have a young man from Turkey who lived in Hamburg, Germany, who was an exchange student in Missoula, Montana, who was shot in his garage by a gentleman of Korean descent. And none of I realize those are facts, but they weren't necessarily pertinent facts.
Yeah, I just wonder if he'd have done that in Germany, how would the German court have dealt with Didi?
I don't know.
He would have maybe gotten in trouble. From what my understanding is, your personal property is less secure in most European countries under European law than it is in the West, and certainly you would have been in more trouble if you had used a firearm in Germany than if you had it in the U.S. because they have much stricter firearm laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the German society would look very favorably upon what do they call it, garage hopping at night.
Yes, I hear you.
And I think it's just a pity that somebody in his family and somebody in his life did not teach him that number 7 of our commandments is thou shalt not steal.
I hear you. Hey, Katie, thanks for...
It's really sad that the moral laws have been disregarded, and it is our civil courts that make the decisions instead of referring back to what is God's law on this matter.
Good point,
That's
Katie.
my thought for the day.
Thanks for the call. We appreciate it. That leaves us with about a minute for Eric. Eric, thanks for holding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say about what Marilyn said. Life is important, so I don't want to minimize what she stated. I'd like to add, though, that murder is a fruit of a deeper problem, and it is a fruit of inborn sin, which is a hostility towards God, which we have all received in Adam. And until that is taken care of, we're all, anyway, that should be taken care of, is our relationship to God through Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Hey, thanks,
Have a good day, Eric.
Appreciate the call. All right. Third time's a charm. All right.
We've got tomorrow.
Yes, we do.
And so I asked the other day, because we didn't even get to talk about it, but I was curious what people thought. I asked you the question, Rand Paul versus Ted Cruz, what would you say?
Right.
And you chose Ted Cruz.
I chose just because.
And anyway, that question kind of went a little viral on our Facebook page.
Really?
Lots of people sending their responses.
Wow.
So I've got some clips from Rand that I loaded today we didn't use, but we'll talk about that probably a little bit Friday. But who knows? John's plans don't matter. We'll probably kick that all out the door and do something totally different. But
all right.
Something to bring to the table tomorrow.
I want to just say thank you to Quentin Rhoades, who spent some time with us this morning, explained a very interesting legal case, and which engendered a lot of discussion among our listeners. We appreciate that. And Talkback, remember, is on from 9 to 10 tomorrow, because we have Catching the Big Ones live from Paradise Falls from 8 to 9 with the captain and his crew. So there you go. So get hooked. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine.